What does it mean to be equally yoked? And how do you know if you are equally yoked or unequally yoked?
So just for the biblical reference for that, let me pull it up. 2 Corinthians 6:14, do not be yoked together with unbelievers, for what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? Or what fellowship can light have with darkness? So we don't want to go beyond what Scripture is telling us there, is teaching us there. It's not that I'm a Baptist, so they have to be a Baptist per se. But are they a person of the light? Do they genuinely love Jesus or not?
Hi, welcome back to the GBC podcast. I'm Jeana Linhart.
I'm Pastor Jon Brewer.
And we are talking about dating today. Dating is not in the Bible.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's in our culture.
Yep.
So it's not specifically addressed in a straightforward way in the Bible, but we can get some principles from Scripture, and we need wisdom and discernment around it as Christians. So dating is part of our life and our culture. Mm-hmm. So how do we even define dating?
Well, back to your starting point there, just because it's not in the Bible explicitly doesn't mean we just ignore it.
Right.
As Christian leaders, we have to talk about everything that's relevant to people, which is why we do this podcast. So dating is not spelled out for us, but I think the Bible has plenty to say about relationships and relationships with the opposite sex. And so there's a lot of wisdom, I think, for us as we navigate this topic. So the way that I have defined dating is as follows: the process by which one discerns the compatibility of a potential marriage partner. I'll say it again: process by which one discerns the compatibility of a potential marital partner. So, and there's not just one thing that you do to discern whether or not someone's compatible, right? There's a myriad of tools in the tool belt that we use to make all kinds of decisions, right? And that is true for a potential person that we would want to marry. So that's important. We wanted to define that up front, right? Just so that people understand as we spell out these biblical ideas and give tips and things like that, it's all under the umbrella of that definition. If you have a different definition of dating that includes finding yourself, knowing yourself better, just learning to relate to the opposite sex, those aren't necessarily wrong. That's just not the way we're defining it. So that's our starting point today.
I think that's good and helpful. And I think there's clearly stages of dating. So if you start dating when you're in high school, you're not necessarily looking for your spouse in those relationships, but it is a lot of
at least not
discovery.
in an immediate sense.
So yourself, you're learning about what you like, and it will ultimately lead to that goal. But you don't need to think in every relationship, I might marry this person.
Well, I guess the only way I'd clarify that is if you know for sure you wouldn't marry this person, probably not a good idea to date them. They should be within the realm of a possible candidate. But I think where a lot of this generation, at least I'm hearing where it goes off the rails quickly, is that pressure we put on ourselves or the other to that this needs to work out or this needs to move that direction at a certain rate or we're messing it up. And I feel like with a number of these topics, we're just trying to diffuse the tension, let the air out of the balloon a little bit. Just breathe easy. This is intended to be actually an enjoyable process and exciting to see what does it have in store for my life and to what degree will this person be a part of my future. And those are exciting things to explore and shouldn't feel like super weighty. So pursuit without pressure, I would say, is really key to a successful dating season of your life. People want a potential partner. They want to feel pursued. They want to feel wanted, but also they don't want to feel pressured at the same time. So you got to find that right balance, both in terms of how you feel about it and how you enter into it, but also the way that you interact with this other person. You don't want them to feel like you've already got your 5-year plan mapped out with them.
So it sounds like from the beginning, there should be a lot of communication. What are we doing? What is the purpose here? How much pressure are we putting on ourselves?
Sure. And not reading into things too much at the same time. Valerie and I started dating. I knew she was into tennis. I had played some tennis. So I said, let's go play some tennis. I didn't say, let's go and talk about all of our hopes for the future right out of the gate. We just did something we both enjoyed to do, and it wasn't a loaded question. We're just going to go play. We're going to spend some time just connecting, chatting, sharing a little bit of what life is like. Where are you from? Low stakes, low pressure, having some fun together. There was a net between us, things like that. And so we have to have pacing, and we need to have, I would describe it as this increasing investment over time. So it's low stakes, low pressure, even kind of low investment on the front end. You don't want to be sending any additional signals that the person could be misreading where you are in the process.
I have a family member who, when she was a young woman, was dating someone, and he asked in a general way, do you want to get married? As in, do you ever want to get married? And she completely read that as, I just got proposed to. And it was pretty awkward. So as Christians, we're trying to live our lives in a way that's honoring to God.
Right.
How does dating fit into that?
Well, that's a good question because, again, it goes back to your definition of dating, of what marriage is about, of what life is about, right? So if we're honoring God as a disciple of Jesus, I want to honor God in all of my decisions. I'm seeing my life as belonging to Him, something that I'm stewarding for His sake and for His purposes, and that in exchange, He loves me, He's adopted me in His family. He wants His best for me. And so as I go about dating or thinking about marriage, it's all about how is God going to accomplish His purposes in me or potentially through this relationship. And so if this other person does not seem compatible in the sense of you don't have the same vision for honoring God with your lives, well, that's a deal breaker right up front, right? The Bible talks about not being unequally yoked. It is baffling to see the number of folks that compromise on number one thing this person should share in terms of trajectory of life and values and worldview. But hey, we like the same hobbies, and other things become too important, and the more important things take a back seat to the less important things. So keeping honor of God first and foremost has to be a paramount thing. But it's also, if it's a biblical marriage that we're ultimately hoping for, what that means is my life is not primarily about me, right? The Bible talks about how honor one another above yourselves, and that consider the other person, consider their needs above your own.
Oh, yes.
Right? Consider them even more important than yourself. It's not to say that they are more important than yourself, but you're to treat them that way. And the ideal marriage, the marriage that God intends for us, is where both needs get met, but not by me looking out for myself, but for the partners looking out for one another. And so if that's the trajectory, if that's what we're aiming for, then even in my dating relationships, yes, I'm looking for a partner for myself, but I'm also there for the sake of the other person. I want what's best for this dating partner, and maybe that's not me. So I need to hold them with an open hand before the Lord.
My husband and I recently did some premarital counseling with a couple, and my husband said that he views his job as a husband to be the one who's willing to die first. And the couple kind of nodded, that makes sense. What's the wife's job? And I said, to be willing to die first. It's actually really beautiful to know that my husband is constantly willing to put me above him, and it makes me want to put his needs above mine. And when we're both doing that, it's a really healthy and mutually beneficial situation.
Yes. And the biblical model is, yes, we're putting the other above ourselves, and yet we're still putting God first, right? And so that's key, because if we don't put God first and we end up putting this other partner first, well, that's called idolatry. So there is this intentional, purposeful ordering that God has in mind for us with these relationships.
I think in our, I don't even remember which episode now, but we have talked about how, I think it was the singleness one, another person is never going to be able to meet all of the needs that you have in the way that God can. And so that dating relationship will always need that safeguard of not leaning into idolatry. So what kind of discernment do you think couples need as they enter into a dating relationship?
When you're discerning about a potential dating partner, what are the things that you're actually looking for? I think the first thing to say is you're not looking for the path of least resistance. What I mean by that is a lot of folks are finding each other online on these dating apps, etc. And a lot of it is swipe left, swipe right. And in some ways that's really helpful. It takes some of the pressure off. But the challenge with dating is it's implicitly a little bit risky. And so we're removing some of the inherent risk from that situation. And it actually, in the long run, can be a little bit of a setback in our own sanctification journey, that we are meant to be people of courage and stepping out in faith and taking risks appropriately as we try to honor God with our lives. And sometimes we can actually just instead settle for, well, this person also swiped right, or whichever way it goes.
I don't know.
I sound really old. I'm sorry. And so we both swiped the same direction. So I guess we're dating, or we're going to try this out. And you actually haven't done any discernment yet. Maybe you've read a profile, and that's very minimal discernment. And so you're actually postponing some discernment until you meet this person in a dating context. You haven't even had them in the friend context yet. But not necessarily that that's wrong, but I'm just trying to draw attention to, just because you both have made some early agreement to move in this direction doesn't mean you should just keep going down that road because nobody's pumping the brakes. You need to be engaged in discernment all along the way, not just, well, she likes me, so we'll keep going.
But just because it's easy doesn't mean it's the right thing.
That's exactly. So that's the first part of it. I think it's really valuable to actually do this practice of writing out, what are my values? What is my life about? And actually making this distinction. Maybe make that list first. Just flush it all out. What's important when you're looking for a potential partner? And then parse out from there. What are the deal breakers? And then what are the things that are just differences that maybe I have some opinion about? I wish they liked tennis, but maybe they don't. Like, that's a difference, but it's not a deal breaker, right? And so if we're honest, I think we all have some things that we would like to be deal breakers, but really ought not be in that category because we're not being open to something that God might want a difference to be there between us and our spouse that wouldn't be a preference for us, but is actually God's best for us.
Right. Well, and also not leaving room for how people change over time. People are going to grow and change, and we don't allow room for differences. We miss out.
And that's just part of the nature of marriage, right? Is for better or worse, sickness and health. On the one hand, you marry what you marry, and they may never change in this category or that category. And on the other hand, they may change in ways that you could have never anticipated. And it's always a step of faith when you enter into that covenant relationship. So you just have to know that going in, that there's going to be things that are totally out of your control, especially as it relates to the other person. We need to ask intentional questions about who they are and where they think they're headed in life. That might feel a little forced, but it's really key for your discernment process. If we don't share the same values, if we don't have a sense of, to some degree, of where God's calling us, how he's gifted us and equipped us for the kind of life that he wants us to live, we're setting ourselves up for a really difficult situation where I feel called to the mission field. Well, I've lived in the same town my whole life and I never want to leave. That's a really difficult situation. And it's wisest not to just say, well, God will help us work it all out. God has given you minds, and he's given you hearts, and he's given you discernment to work it out together. And yes, God wants to have input about that, but don't just push it down the road. As your relationship is getting increasingly more invested, and so it may not be a question for your first date, and that may come to light in the very first date, but you'll want to tuck that away in the back of your mind to bring up 3 or 4 or 5 dates in. Hey, let's get back to, I remember you said this. By the way, that's really attractive when you can remember what that person has said 4 dates ago and be able to recall that and say, hey, I'd love to unpack that a little bit more and understand the qualifiers and context around that desire to never move or whatever the topic is.
So we're asking intentional questions, and we have to be paying attention to how they're answering and noticing if what they say matches what they do.
Absolutely.
Does their life match who they're claiming to be?
Because the thing about dating, just like social media, we're putting our best foot forward, right? So if this other person wants, to some degree, want to impress, and they know that you're a believer, well, maybe they might exaggerate to some degree their level of commitment to Jesus, or how much they go to church, or whatever it is. And so, yes, you, to a degree, you want to take them at their word, and you should be establishing trust. And if you're not, that's a red flag. But you're also watching their life to match their words. And that's also going to be an indicator of whether or not this person is integrous and that you want to spend your life with them. But on the other hand, maybe that's the extreme in a sense, but there's also just maybe a lack of self-awareness. Maybe I'm just not living for Jesus to the degree that I would like to think that I am. So those are different. We discern those differently, right? And those mean different things. In the context of an increasingly committed relationship, there might be opportunity for you to bring that up as somebody who loves and cares about this person. Maybe you're not ready to say love yet, but you like them and you care about them and you want God's best for them. And maybe there's an opportunity to say, hey, you've expressed these things about your walk with Jesus, but it seems like on the weekends I'm not hearing about you're going to church, and we're certainly not going together. So what does your relationship with Jesus actually look like? Those kinds of things, for example.
It seems like as you're doing the exercise about differences and deal breakers, it would also be beneficial to do a little self-assessment and figure out, who am I? What do I like? What are my goals in life?
Absolutely.
And be able to see if there's compatibility there.
And it doesn't mean you have to have your whole future mapped out. That's not what we're saying at all. But to the degree that you have some self-awareness about who you are, how God's gifted you, what it would look like to steward your life well, and to the degree that God has maybe revealed to you some direction for college, post-college, or no college, whatever it is, like, it's only helpful to you to know yourself and for them to be able to have that insight. But you also don't want to just make things up to try to look good to the other person, because we're also tempted to impress the other, right? So I guess the last thing I would say about discernment is, of course, we're prayerfully inviting God to give us insight and direction, right? Where it's not just like God saying, go for it, figure out what is best for you, but he has something to say about that. And so we're being prayerful. You should have loving older people in your life, godly people who are able to speak into these things in your life. And so just don't try to go it alone. Don't try to discern it for yourself, but invite other partners into that discernment process, and particularly the Lord.
What does it mean to be equally yoked? And how do you know if you are equally yoked or unequally yoked?
So just for the biblical reference for that, let me pull it up. 2 Corinthians 6:14, do not be yoked together with unbelievers, for what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? Or what fellowship can light have with darkness? So we don't want to go beyond what Scripture is telling us there, is teaching us there. It's not that I'm a Baptist, so they have to be a Baptist per se. But are they a person of the light? Do they genuinely love Jesus or not? Do they have a desire to please God in the way they live their life or not? That doesn't mean they have to be perfect in the way that they live it out, but is that they genuinely how they feel and what they're shooting for with their life. Way to go about discerning this question is not just like, are you Christian? Check the box, yes or no, right? But at some point along the way, you're going to have more faith conversations and asking questions. So I know you believe, but when you're tempted to doubt, what are the places that you struggle with? Unpacking those together. What are the days where it's really just hard for you to follow Jesus? Or what are categorically, what are some areas where you don't look very much like Jesus yet? The way that they answer those kinds of questions, I think, is really key. Are they thinking about those kinds of questions for their own self-reflection and discernment? Do they care about growing more into the image of Christ? All of that stuff is going to be really revelatory for you. And it may not have good answers right away, but dating is a process and they need room to grow just like you do. So it's not like, well, they didn't have a good answer, they're out. Part of the discernment is, what is an acceptable answer for now that I'd like to see change in before we cross over into that covenant relationship?
Yeah.
So it's not easy.
I'm just thinking about the agricultural term of yoke is two oxen hooked together.
Right.
So imagining that your life is hooked together with someone else, how will moving with this person sharpen you? How will you be shaped by living life alongside another person?
Good. Yep. I think there is some ability there to forecast a little bit. If I were to do life side by side with this person, would I like the person that I'm going to turn into as I do life with them? And vice versa. Am I the kind of person, I'm living the kind of life where I can see my life being of benefit to this other person as we do life together? Don't just think of it for yourself. Think of it for them too.
I want to walk side by side with my partner. I don't want to feel like I'm being dragged, and I don't want to feel like I'm dragging someone behind me.
Right.
I want to have a rhythm of life where we are together and we're helping each other.
And that
instead of
doesn't mean
hindering.
there's never friction.
Oh, no.
Right. Bible says iron sharpens iron. One man sharpens another, or man and woman. There's going to be friction. There's going to be conflict. If there's no conflict in your dating relationship, then you haven't really started dating yet, probably. That's overstated, but I think you understand the point. The differences should come out at some point, and you should have to work through those things. But friction actually is refining, right? So to the degree that we are not moving in the same direction, we need to work through that to see if we can get going in the same direction again. And so some of that early conflict resolution is going to be really key for your discernment process of, are we going to be able to move in the same direction or not? Because it may look that way at first, but when some things come to a head, then you'll be able to see, can we work this out? Can we get back on track together or not?
I think those deal breaker questions are going to be really key in that, because I'm not going to be able to handle it if you yell in conflict or something like that. If that can't be something that's worked out, that's a good sign that maybe this is not a good yoking.
It's not that they will never slip up and raise their voice, right? But we talk a lot about in premarital counseling. It's not, when we talk about conflict resolution, and we try to help couples establish rules for fighting fair. And the rules are not there to say, we'll always follow them. The rules are there to give us guardrails for how we do this. And it's also like, we both agree in advance, this is what it looks like to mess up and what we're going to apologize for, so that we know how to move forward together. And so that even in a dating relationship, you're going to start to develop some of those things. And to the degree to which you guys can agree about how to work through conflict and resolve and move forward together, that's going to be really telling for you about whether or not you can make it for the long haul. If you can't develop skills to work through conflict together, not off on a very good footing.
And figuring those things out before you are sharing more than just dinner together, before you're sharing finances and a house, children, all of those things. Well, we need to talk about boundaries in dating. I think there's been a lot of talk about physical boundaries in dating, but I think we also have to consider emotional boundaries and spiritual boundaries. And you brought up one that I hadn't thought of, but financial boundaries. What can you say about all of those?
Well, let's start with physical, because even though you can read about those or hear about those in other places, this may be your first stop. So physical boundaries, the Bible is very clear that sex is reserved for marriage relationship. So that is physical boundary number one. There are certain things that are reserved for that covenant relationship. All the way back to Genesis, we read about Adam and Eve in the first marriage, and they are naked and they are not ashamed, right? And that's a beautiful picture of what marriage is intended to be. We're in a fallen world and it's imperfect, and yet it is a place where we should feel safe to be vulnerable and know that the other person is not going to harm, not going to take advantage, and that they're going to love us where we are and as we are. And so that covenant of that marriage relationship is what enables that to become the safe place that we need. Without that covenant, there's always the inherent risk of they're going to see me and reject me. Right? And so we need to have that assurance ahead of time that, no, this is a safe place. We've done the work ahead of time. Adam and Eve didn't have this benefit, but we have the benefit of knowing the other in advance of entering into this marriage covenant enough to know whether or not this is a safe person for me to be vulnerable with more than anybody else, and to know that they're not just going to run off or harm us in an intentional kind of way. So that's why that most intimate physical component is reserved for that marriage relationship. But that's really only the beginning of the conversation of physical boundaries, right? And we're not going to get into every single nuance and detail of that. But one of the good litmus test questions that I was given as a young man was, if you're to fast forward the tape to your marriage relationship, and even imagine, not graphically, but that there's a sexual component to your relationship, is there anything that, as you look back at your story, that you would regret in those times of intimacy with your marriage partner? Would there be situations in which you would be tempted to look back or you just remember about a previous relationship that you don't want to have flashbacks of as you're having intimacy with your partner? So that's a really good standard to live by. What are the things that I don't want to regret when I get to that marriage relationship, assuming that that day comes? Even if it doesn't, we still want to live with that kind of integrity, right? But also, it doesn't have to be, we're not just talking about intercourse, right? But any kind of touching or connection that, when you think about a husband and wife, should be exclusive for that kind of relationship. So I'm trying to not be overly specific, because there may be some folks out there that say, I want to save kissing for my wife or my husband. Others may not feel as strongly about that, and the Bible's just not super specific about that. I don't want to be overly specific about that. Follow your own convictions. Remember, the goal is to honor the Lord with all of our decisions, and to do so in a biblical way and with as much clarity as the Bible gives us. So you're going to have to use your own discernment there. But my counsel to you is, make those decisions in advance.
Yes.
Don't wait for the moment to come to make a decision about whether or not you're going to do this or that physical activity as a couple. I would advise you to, as much as possible, especially as you're growing more and more close to this person, watch out for places where you're in private together. The temptation's only going to get stronger to break those physical boundaries. And so it doesn't mean that you can never be alone, but you should have a way of escape, and it should be easy for you to do the right thing.
And I think it should be from a mindset of wanting to honor the Lord and each other. It seems like a lot of times the question is, well, how far can we go? And where's the line? But rather than trying to think of, how much can I get away with? How much can I honor this person? And how much can I honor God? And how much can we save for our wedding night? What about emotional boundaries?
This is tricky. It's tricky to describe this, right? But the goal is to, again, that marriage relationship is intended to be the place where you are metaphorically and literally naked and unashamed, right? And so there's a certain amount of emotional vulnerability that you can have with a friend, with a family member, that is not necessarily going to be unique to that person, at least categorically. Maybe you don't have a lot of close friendships, and that's a totally different story, a different conversation than today. But as you're in this dating relationship, would it be appropriate categorically for you to share vulnerable things with, am I sharing things in this relationship that I could equally share with a best friend? If there are things that you wouldn't share with a best friend, but you're tempted to share with this dating partner, you might want to think twice about that. Now, does that mean that you can't have inside jokes and things that are unique to this friendship? That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying categorically, would it be inappropriate to share with another person who is of the same sex that's your best friend? And if that's not categorically true, I think that's a good kind of test to know whether or not that's appropriate. The caveat to that, or maybe clarifier to that, is are there some things that as you're getting close to marriage that, and maybe you're not quite engaged yet, but you're already talking about engagement, are there some things that they really ought to know before they move into that category of fiance, let alone husband or wife? And just things that if the roles were reversed, things that you really feel like you should know or want to know, there might be some things in that category that you'll need to discern whether or not to share. And again, you're including other people in some of those decisions. And so I'm talking about things like maybe you had a really unhealthy dating situation previously, and some of those details ought to be divulged or perhaps need to be divulged. Is there somebody safe you could talk to, maybe not with the details, but saying, I've got this category of stuff that happened in an unhealthy relationship. Do you think I ought to share that with this person I'm considering getting engaged to? And really leaning into some counsel for that. So
Spiritual boundaries.
I guess what I mean there is we have this biblical imagery of two becoming one. That's what the marriage is intended to look like. And that's obviously describing a physical intimacy, an emotional intimacy. It's also describing like two just distinct lives coming together. A person going in this journey with God in my life. She is this person going on a journey with God in this life, and now we're on a journey together. And yet, we want to be careful to say we're still two individuals. I'm still John. My wife is still Valerie. She has her own relationship with God that's different than mine. And yes, there's some overlap there. And there's a beautiful intimacy that happens between a marriage relationship as we invite God into that together. And yet it never replaces the individual relationships that we have with God. So there's going to be some folks out there that will be tempted to lose yourself in the relationship with this person. And that could even take a spiritual component that we go to church together, we do Bible study together, we pray together, and I don't do anything with God other than what I do with this partner. And that's a problem. You have your own relationship with God that you need to nurture.
That's really good too. I know there have been people who, after a breakup, that somehow has severed something in their relationship with God too, because that boundary wasn't in place.
That's right. So that's another test. If this relationship were to fail or go away, would my relationship with God be hampered in any way? If it is, there's some work that you need to do there to, again, cultivate that individual relationship.
So what about financial boundaries? I'm imagining things like we're dating and we just bought a business together.
Watch out for that. It could just be like there's some traditional folks out there that would think the guy's always going to pay for the date, for example. And I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with the guy paying for stuff. Is it a problem for the girl to pay for stuff? If in the mind of any of the guys out there, it's wrong for a dating partner to ever pay for stuff, I think that's weird. It's okay for her to spend some money. And when you do get married one day, it's jointly your money, right? And so you should be okay with both people spending money to invest in the relationship. And yet, your monies is not your money yet, right? And so you should not be giving a significant loan to your dating partner. You shouldn't be getting a joint banking account yet.
Or planning how to spend their money.
Right. Making financial goals together before you've entered into this covenant relationship. You can project maybe if you're in an engagement season, you're thinking in that direction. But if you're in a dating relationship and your dating partner is talking a lot about how to spend your money, that's a red flag, at least a yellow flag. Watch out for that. And you should both have your own money at that stage of the game.
What about boundaries that happen with people outside of the dating relationship? Now you've defined the relationship. Everyone knows you are dating each other, but now there's other people who might be interested in pursuing you and friendships and parents and
right. There's a lot of different angles at that, but we talked about this beforehand. We would both counsel people date one person at a time. And when we say date it one person at a time, what we mean is in a committed sense, right? It's one thing to go to prom with somebody And that's sort of a date, but is it really? Like you're going out to have a fun time with someone of the opposite sex, hopefully in a group, not just doing it, the two of you. That would be not setting yourself up for success. But just because you go to a dance with somebody doesn't mean you're in a committed relationship, right? And if you're sending any signals that the other person thinks that you are, then you need to clarify quick with that person. It should be understood that this is just a one-time thing and it's intended to be fun. There's a difference between that and being in a committed relationship where we are continually dating, not just going on a date or dates. So got to have those DTRs that define the relationship moments where you actually communicate about what is this thing that we're doing together? What are we after here? Are we just we're going on a date, a couple of dates, and then at some point you need to say, I'd like to keep doing this. Let's have some intentionality about seeing where God might want to take this.
Intentional communication is only going to serve you through your whole life, even in marriage. When my husband plans a date for me, I want to know what's going on and what his intentions are, not this, what do you want to do tonight?
Sure.
Like, be intentional.
Sure.
And communicate that intention.
That doesn't mean you need to, I asked Valerie to go play tennis for the first time and I got to spell out exactly where I'm hoping this will go, right? But it's after a couple of times of getting together, the other person is starting to wonder, where is this headed? So it's not every time you get together, but don't wait too long before you get to those clarifying types of conversations. And just think of it as an opportunity to affirm this other person and that you're caring for them as you bring clarity to the situation. So in terms of other people, though, outside of the dating relationship, it should be clear that you're in a dating relationship with somebody, meaning that it's exclusive. You're not dating other people at the same time. Isn't that just the same attitude and courtesy you would want a dating partner to have with you? I can't imagine being in a dating relationship where the other person is simultaneously dating other people and I'm now I'm in a competition. I have to one up whoever your next date is. And also that just going to muddy your discernment process too if you're serial dating. So just one at a time, take your time, discern what you need to discern, and don't make it harder on yourself. But the other facet of this is I'm in an exclusive relationship, and yet I'm friends with, in my case, other females. How do I relate to those other females in my life? Even they know I'm in an exclusive dating relationship. We're still going to be friends. That doesn't need to go away. And yet, how do I do that in a way that honors the one that I'm dating and also honors the friendships in a way that's not either misleading or just inappropriate for the kind of relationship that it is. So
we talked in our singleness episode about treating each other as siblings, but also being intentional with your friendships, that you're not going to be flirty or overly affectionate. It's going to be clear that I'm in a relationship with someone else and I will not act like that with anybody else.
It's not just how you act, but it's how much time you spend, right? And what context you spend time in. And so I'm not going to go over to another female's house, especially if we're going to be alone. You're not going to be in my place. That's true for marriage, but it's also true for dating. There's certain boundaries that are appropriate. So I'm hanging out with friends of the opposite sex in public places. I'm being careful about the kind of affection that I offer. I'm careful about not sending any mixed signals. And there may need to be some DTRs with your friends too. Just to clarify, I'm in this dating relationship. This occupies a certain place in my heart and mind. And man, I love being friends with you. And this is the kind of space it occupies in my life. And it's a different kind of thing. So you may not need to have that, but some friendships you may need to clarify for their sake where you're at.
And I think that's honoring to your friends, to be clear. So what are some dating tips for people that want to date?
I do enjoy this conversation. It's fun. As I've listened to various podcasts and content around this topic, it is a different dating scene than when we were in those years. And it's become much harder for certain reasons to find potential partners. And so the first word is go where you can meet potential partners. if you feel like you have God's blessing to pursue a dating relationship, and there may be seasons where you feel like God's saying not right now, so that's maybe a first word to say. But if you feel like God's giving you the green light to do that, the best thing to do is start by going where people are. And yes, I think online is okay. There are people there. They're not actually there. They have a digital footprint there, but they're not actually there. It's way better if you can get in the same space with people. You're going to filter out so many more people as potential dating partners in person than you can ever do with a screenshot or a profile. And so you're going to waste actually a ton of time if you're only trying to do online dating. So if you can go to places where people are, church is a great place because you already know to some degree that you have some shared values, shared worldview. That doesn't mean that there's not discernment to be had there about their walk with Jesus. But you're a leg up. You're a couple steps down the road further than you are just doing things online. So take time to be intentional about physically going to those places. But online too is okay. It's not wrong to go there. I'm just saying that you have some extra hurdles with that platform. So be careful about where you go, right? You're not just going to places either online or in person where young people are or where people your age or demographic are. Be thoughtful about it. I'm not likely to meet a kind of partner that I want to have. As somebody who's committed to not drinking, bars are not a great place for me to go to find a potential partner. So you need to consider your values. Where are people who are likely to have your values spending time, right? And so, yes, I realize that's harder to find those places and spaces these days and then perhaps than it used to be, but all the more reason that we need to put ourselves out there so that other potential partners can find us too, right? It's not just about us finding somebody, but other people finding us too. So I do want to put a word of caution out about online because this is probably not news to most of you, but just because somebody's put a picture up or a profile up does not mean it's trustworthy information. Right. So just exercise extreme caution with some of these dating sites because anybody can get on and make a profile and anybody can pose to be somebody else for a certain period of time without starting to give clues away that they're not who they say they are. And so if you're pursuing a dating relationship that way, be super cautious about, I think it's time to meet up. How should we meet? Well, let's go to this private thing over here. No. You need to meet in public. You need to not give away certain personal information and make sure that you're developing some trust with this person. They've got to earn your trust before you start giving away personal information that they could use to exploit you or manipulate you in different ways.
And tell other people where you're going and what you're doing, just for safety's sake.
So I think it's just key as best you can, get to know these people in communal situations where you're with other people, like group dating, or even if you're not dating, you're just hanging out with a co-ed group of people who could potentially be a dating partner. That is so helpful in your discernment process, but also to invite the other friends that you have in that friend group. They've got eyes on this person and they can give you good insight. And, oh, you stepped out of the room when they said this thing. That's so valuable. So try to find that if you can.
And you want to know how your partner treats other people.
Totally.
Not just how they treat you.
That's right. Absolutely.
So we are encouraging people to get to know each other through dating. There also still needs to be healthy non-dating friendships who are giving insight into this, and you're not neglecting your friendships. How do you pursue a dating relationship and not just lose the rest of your life because that has become the most important relationship to you?
If you've been around other people that are dating, you have probably had some people in your life that have disappeared, right? So they get so enmeshed in this relationship, or there's this infatuation that's developed that they neglect everybody else in their life. Part of that's a learning curve, right? As a young person, that's where we're learning how to live out our values and to intentionally invest in the things that matter. And there's just a learning curve there. And so have some grace for those people that disappear for a while, but also pursue those friendships. Don't give up on them. Be waiting for them to come back. But if you're that person in that relationship, be mindful that this dating relationship may not last. And I think it's really helpful to have the mindset with a dating partner. If the dating relationship were to end, could we still be friends? Right? I think that's so, if you can continue to have that mindset and behave in such a way that you could be friends, if the dating relationship were to end, you're setting yourself up for success so well there. But you're also probably setting yourself up well to maintain your other friendships too. And so, as we said earlier, you are intentionally pacing yourself, and there's this increasing investment in this relationship over time. And that will mean more time. But if your whole world begins to revolve around this person, first of all, you're not honoring God with all of your time, because God's got other ways he wants you to spend your time. Part of that's friendships, part of that's other responsibilities to steward. But if this dating relationship is to fail, and you may or may not be able to keep it as a friendship, but guess what? You've got this support network that you want there waiting for you.
Yes.
Not just if it fails, but even if you hit some conflict or even things are going really well, you still want that support network around you. So you need to continue to invest there for your own sake, but also because they need you to be their friend.
Right.
So
What's some specific advice you would give to men in dating relationships?
the first thing I would say is, guys, you got to take some initiative. We were talking about this offline. Yes, it's not to say that women should never take initiative, but guys are pretty notorious for not taking initiative, at least to the degree that I think is healthy for someone who intends to be a spiritual leader in the home. And, I think the biblical model is that men are intended to be leaders. And again, I'm not saying that women aren't also leaders, but I think some of the challenge of the fall is that we've abdicated some of our God-given responsibility to go after things and to pursue goals and to steward our lives. And we've just allowed others, oftentimes the women in our lives, to take over in certain areas of our lives. And that can go for a dating relationship too. They pursue the relationship to begin with. They plan the dates. Again, I'm trying to be careful to say it's not wrong for women to do this activity or that activity, or to take some leadership or take initiative. Not saying that categorically at all. But what I am saying is, guys, step up. Pursue the things that you think God wants you to pursue in your life. And if that's a dating relationship or a marriage relationship, own that. Step out, take a risk. And I think that even particularly in this day and age, I think men seem to be more challenged to do that. And so, again, this is a counsel for guys. I'm not trying to say anything categorically about women around taking initiative or leadership, but I think that's an important word for guys to hear. Don't wait on the woman to take a step. If you have a certain level of conviction from God and you're trying to honor him with your life, step out. I don't think it's a stretch to say this is a step of faith. If you're trying to honor God with your life and you feel like you have the green light today and you think this is a woman that could be a potential life partner with you in pursuing the things of God, that's a step of faith to go after that. So don't just allow other people to dictate what you will and won't do in your life. Step out. Was that enough qualifiers?
I don't 100% agree with you, and that's okay. I think that is a really human thing to abdicate responsibility, not just a male thing.
Sure.
And so I agree. Humans need to step up, and that includes men. And for women, I would say, let men take initiative. You will want someone who initiates
Right.
in many areas of life. And so you need to practice that.
Yep.
And I would say to women, take initiative. And for men to let her take initiative, because you will want someone who initiates.
That's true.
And so take turns initiating, but don't be afraid to be direct and to advocate for what you need and what you're hoping for. And also don't feel pressure to just simply agree when someone expresses, this is what I want or what I need, but have honest communication around those things.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's helpful. So maybe the word there is just some reciprocation, right? That both people are invested. Both people are having a level of intentionality. And I think it's good to be watchful. Is this other person as invested in this relationship as I want to be or try to be? That doesn't mean equitable. It doesn't mean it's tit for tat. Like I initiated this one, he's got the next one that's not the definition of marriage that we're after, right? I'm in this for their sake, they're in it for my sake. That's what we're trying to live for, in a sense. But it is an indicator of, is this somebody that cares as much as I do and is as invested as I am?
And you don't want to feel like you're just waiting for something to happen. A funny story in my own life was some of his relatives had decided they were not going to say I love you before they were engaged. And Gary thought that was a really great idea. And so he didn't tell me that he loved me in English. He would say it in Hebrew. And I knew what he was saying, and I knew why he wasn't saying I love you. But I felt like I cannot move forward in this relationship if I don't know that I am loved. And so finally, I just had to ask him, do you love me? But I had to take that initiative. Yeah. And I'm so glad I did. Yeah. He's so glad he did. But don't be afraid to ask for clarification.
That's great. Thank you for clarifying that.
So I think there's 3 major common myths or lies about dating that are maybe not especially in Christian culture, but often in Christian culture. One of the big ones, there is one right person for you. You have a soulmate and you are destined to be together and you have to find the one. Is that true?
That's the Disney story, right? Is that, I found the one. But there's some inherent dangers with that mentality, right? If there's only one right person out there, then have I missed them? What if I miss them? What if they miss me and they marry somebody else? What if I marry somebody different and then I find them? That's a terrible situation.
Dun, dun, dun.
So no, there's not one right person. The Bible does not convey that idea at all. The typical form of marriage in the New Testament was arranged marriage. And so unless your parents know the one right person for you, then that's not likely to happen in that situation. No, but seriously, that's actually the beauty of God's design, is that once you are married, God intends for you to stay married to that person. And there's exceptions to that. That's a story for another day. But the fact that God can weave 2 lives together and that he can use this other person to sanctify, be part of your sanctifying process. He can use you to help sanctify this other person, and that you cannot kill each other along the way. That's just a testament to God's faithfulness, to the power of God to transform lives. It's a reason for worship, right? That he can weave these 2 lives together. And sometimes those lives fit very naturally together at first, and sometimes there's a lot of friction at first. But the fact that they can make it over the long haul because God is involved and intervening and giving us the tools and framework to know how to do conflict, how to forgive, how to reconcile, how to move forward together. Because I'm not after just the things that I want. You're not after just the things that you want, but we are after the things that God wants for us. That's a godsend. That's a rescue, that we're not just at the mercy of whether or not we found that perfect fit. Right? Because when we imagine that one right person, what are we imagining? We're imagining someone with whom we'll never have to have conflict, who will give us exactly what we want, and he'll take us with all of our flaws, and magically they'll get everything they need from us at the same time.
And they'll automatically just know everything about you without having to learn it.
And that intimacy will be natural and easy, and there will never be any challenge there. And we'll want the exact same number of children, and we won't have any trouble having children or raising children. That's a fiction. Not in a fallen world. The only perfect union is with God in eternity. And so, yes, our marriage to a degree is supposed to reflect what that relationship with God is intended to be for eternity, but it's also intended to be a reminder that our fallen relationship will not measure up to what that heavenly relationship will be. And so it's both at the same time. And so it's a good thing. There's not that one right person out there. The person is Jesus.
Right. Well, and that myth, it just also reflects a poor theology of our relationship with God. He allows us choice and he gives us free will, and we are not just little pawns that he's shoving around on a chessboard, but he allows us to be active in the life that we choose to live. And that's a good thing too.
Absolutely.
So the next myth is that this person will complete me, will make me whole.
What movie was that? Oh, Jerry Maguire,
Yeah.
you complete me. Yeah. God is the one that makes us whole. That gospel, right? That we are fallen people that need redemption, that need rescue. And journey of sanctification is the journey towards wholeness, which will reach culmination when Jesus comes again.
Yeah.
Story that we're living in. This person won't make me whole. Are they a tool that God will use to help sanctify me? Absolutely. And that's what it's intended to be. They can't complete you. They can't make you whole. You are a whole person in and of yourself. Not like you're only part of a puzzle piece that another person is meant to fill. Like you are a person who is intended to become whole. We are broken because we're fallen people. Another person can't fill that gap. Only God can fill that gap and help us become the people he intends for us to be in his right time, in his right way. When he comes again is when that will culminate. So in other words, to try to make that person fit that slot is to have another idol.
Yeah.
It's another way of looking at that too. That place that God's meant to fill in our lives, not this other person.
Yeah. And to be interdependent. All of our relationships, especially in marriage, we expect someone else to make us whole. That's codependent. And that's
right. I'm not okay unless they're okay.
Yeah.
And they give me what I need. Right.
Yes, that relates to the last myth. Person, maybe they won't complete me, but they will save me. They will fix all my problems.
Yeah, and this is distinct from that last one sense of like about your faults, your flaws, your sin challenges. And for some, there's this wrong expectation that when I get married, these problems will go away, right? So I have a pornography problem and it will go away because I'm married and I'm having sex now. That's not going to happen. It's not how it works. By the way, that was just an example. I wasn't making a confession. It's the other person, again, they're part of the sanctifying process. They're intended to be brought in. You're intended to be naked without shame. Like you're intended to be fully vulnerable with this person. And it's in that space of vulnerability that God works and moves. And this other person, God intends to use for that sanctifying process. They're not going to magically go away. And so an expectation that will not be met. And if that is your expectation and it's unmet, then there's going to be disappointment with marriage because that's not what it's intended to be. Anyway, that's not where the solution or the rescue to your sin problem comes from. It comes from the cross, and it comes from God bringing increasing redemption and sanctification to your life over time. Sin is not something that fixes overnight. And then you hear testimony of people who had an alcohol addiction and just overnight God solves that challenge for them. That's not the normative way that God solves those challenges. It's a long process over time. So
I think we can also believe that myth comes to feelings of security or insecurity. Not married, I will never have to worry about not being understood. Just think marriage is, I'll be financially secure because someone else is bringing in income.
Yeah, good point.
Think that, tempted to believe that marriage is going to save us from the areas where we feel insecure.
Right.
And again, only God can be our security. And a healthy partner can certainly encourage and lean into helping you feel secure, especially emotionally and physically. But
yeah, and I guess the other word about these last couple of myths is like you have the intentionality to date and get married one day. Like mentality ought not be, I need to wait for my marriage partner to start working on these things, right? Like the journey of your life with God is the journey towards wholeness, towards holiness. And so it's not like you need to wait for this person to show up to start making progress in these areas. No, your best gift to your marriage partner is to show up as whole as you can, sinless as you can with the Lord's help. And so to the same degree that you would hope that your marriage partner would show up having resolved some of their sin issues and experienced a measure of like to live that out in your own life and be able to give that as a gift to your future marriage partner. So don't wait.
yeah. Anything else that we should talk about with dating?
I guess we should just double down to say, like, don't assume that God's calling you to date. We talked about this in the singleness episode, like calling everybody to get married. Therefore, God's not calling everybody to date. Don't make the assumption that God's calling you to do that. I can't tell you the number of testimonies that I've heard of people who frustration or various reasons brought them to a place, and I'm saying that in an intentional way, that they just said before God, like, I'm not going to date. Like, I'm done with dating for now until you say go. I'm just going to pursue relationship with you. If you want to bring another person into this thing, this journey together, like, be it. But I'm just going to leave that in your hands. I'm just going to do life with you, and come what may. And there are stories I've heard that are like that, who then, once they've decided to be content with their singleness, content with just relationship with God as their primary relationship, then God opens the door.
Yeah. I think that's also something that's very attractive, is when you see someone who is not constantly searching.
Right.
They are content with where God has them and just leaning into that, and that an attractive quality.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's it.
All right.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in with us. This episode about dating. I'm enjoying just the opportunity to talk about some of these topics that we don't always get to on a Sunday for various reasons, and a ton of more on our list that we're going to get to God's right timing, Lord willing. We also want to hear from you. So every time we're going to continue to invite you to leave a comment, to reach out to us, and what are the topics that are front of mind for you? Where are the places in which you are saying, God, I just don't know what you're calling me to do around this or that topic or idea? We love to address it in a biblical way. And so we even disagree, and that's okay, but it's good to just have conversation partners around these things, right? And so that's what we're trying to encourage. And we'd love to be part of that conversation with you. So we look forward to hearing from you. And until next time.
See ya.
Bye.